people, how are you all? I know it's been a while, like several months, and I would love to say that that is not my fault, but I would be lying. Of course, I have the usual excuses, namely too much uni work, but realistically, I just haven't been making as much time for videos lately. I quite literally left my microphone in Cornwall because I didn't think I'd be recording anything this Easter, which is probably why the audio sounds terrible if you were wondering about that. Although I also have a sore throat, so that might be contributing a little bit. And the reason for this is partly because I've been making more animatics recently, which obviously take a lot longer for a lot shorter video, and also partly because I have been seized lately by two very specific hyperfixations that have consumed all of my thoughts and free time. The first of which was the newest season of The Witcher, actually, which was really, really good, despite what the internet may tell you, and a massive improvement on season 2. However, specifically because of the internet and a very certain handful of very toxic, loud, not nice individuals in that fandom, I've posted very little about the show because, frankly, I don't want the homophobes finding my page and come crawling into my little safe space of the internet I've curated here. But you're likely not here to listen to me talk about The Witcher. You probably want to hear about the other hyperfixation, which, as you may have guessed from the title of the video, is Baldur's Gate 3. And damn am I indeed. Part of the reason I haven't posted much art in recent months is because I am on my second and a half playthrough since I got the game in February, and I'm still not bored of it, and I spend so much time playing, and whilst I'm playing, I obviously can't be drawing. Before we get into it, though, I have a little tiny disclaimer that this video will contain spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, specifically for what happens on a good run-through as Tav, not the Dark Urge, and all the various companion quests and things, with one notable exception, because I accidentally upset her, and she laughed at me, and it was very sad. Although I have started a Dark Urge playthrough, I've just only kind of hit Act 2 on it so far, so I don't know what happens at the end, although I've seen some spoilers, but I don't know exactly how that's going to turn out. Because you see, the thing is, I've never really played that many video games. Partly because I just didn't have the technology to run them. My laptop was very slow, and whilst technically my siblings and I shared an Xbox as kids, it lived in my brother's room after we moved house, and before that we were mostly just using it to play Minecraft. It's also probably about 10 years old now too, so I don't think it would run anything recent anyway. Basically, I didn't own anything that could run decent games, and although I did cave and buy a second-hand Switch last summer so that I could maybe try some, I haven't gotten that far with any of them. However, at Christmas, I finally decided to replace my laptop for something a little more powerful that could actually run all the art and editing programs that I need for my university course, which obviously the university provides computers that we can go in and use, but having them on my own laptop is really, really useful. So I have a new laptop, which is also partly why I haven't done much art in recent months, because I meant to do more over Christmas, and then because I was replacing my laptop, we had a whole load of technical issues. My drawing tablet had a whole load of technical issues, and it all just kind of, I went like 3 weeks where I couldn't draw anything. But it works now, which is really, really good. And because it's a more powerful laptop capable of running like After Effects and all those things, it's also capable of running video games. Not only is The Sims 4 now actually running smoothly, which I've had The Sims 4 for a very long time and just put up with the lag, but now I can play it without it constantly being on pause, which is loads of fun. I also decided to treat myself and buy Baldur's Gate 3 because people have been telling me I would love this game pretty much since the day it came out. I've been trying to get into D&D for a really long time, and whilst I have finally gotten into it and I actually have a campaign I'm playing with some friends, people have still been telling me about this game for basically eternity. So I decided to treat myself and buy it, and I got hooked really, really badly. Also, if you really want the context for how bad I am at video games, and how kind of unfamiliar I am with like the general things that everybody should know about video games, I have only ever finished 2 video games in my entire life. The first one of which was Pokemon Black on the DS, which I finished when I was about 10, and even then I only finished the story, I did not actually collect all of the Pokemon at the end. And Baldur's Gate 3 is the only other one I finished, which I finished a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's safe to say I've become a little obsessed to the extent that I'm back drawing inexplicable amounts of fan art again. This little piece is based on a beautiful screenshot I took in the ritual room under Cazador's palace. I'll put the actual screenshot on the side of the screen somewhere so you can look at it. When my Tav, Casimir, was deciding what to do about the vampire spawn, and they're having this conversation with vampire spawn, and Astarion is just stood behind them, And the lighting was so gorgeous, and the poses kind of really summed up the whole dynamic between Astarion and Cass in my playthrough, which is essentially that Casimir is now a half-elf human shield. And I just thought it was really, really pretty and really cool, and I really wanted to see if I could try do the funky green lighting, which I sort of pulled off a little bit. And so I drew it. This Tav is also the one for whom I actually finished the game with, although he was not my first. He is a half wood elf paladin based vaguely on an OC I already had from a piece of fanfiction I was writing, actually, which I never finished. And he had the Revenge Oath, although I almost immediately broke it when I failed the roll to free Lae'zel peacefully from her cage at the very beginning of the game, and it took me a really long time to work out why I'd failed it, until I was watching Neil Newton's playthrough of the game, and his friend Tom did the exact same thing as me, but on a different Paladin Oath, and I was like, oh, that was it. Yeah, if you fail the Deception roll, you immediately lose your oath. But I decided that was kind of fine, and I had been considering having him become an Oathbreaker partway through the story anyway, so I was just like, I'll just roll with this. But yeah, his personality is kind of slow to trust, but ultimately good-hearted and open to helping anyone as long as he doesn't have to compromise anyone else's safety, particularly his own safety, to do this. In which safety is a relative term when you're a tall, massive built character with plate armor and a huge sword. His dynamic with Astarion is also just very fun to me because he's got such clunky armor that he fails his stealth checks every time, despite the fact that, when he's not wearing armor, his base dexterity is not terrible. And I can just imagine Astarion trying to steal, a load of stuff, and Cass is just drawing all the attention of everyone. He's being all sneaky, and behind him is just this big, clunky paladin, making so much noise, drawing all the guards' attention. Astarion just looks at him like, I cannot take you anywhere. And because it's Astarion, he is obviously still absolutely complaining about this 10 minutes later when he is hiding behind Cass as everybody's firing arrows at them. I played this first playthrough, the first playthrough and the playthrough I actually finished on Explorer mode because I am bad at video games and I didn't want to immediately die. And then, speaking of being bad at video games, I figured it might be fun to tell you about what happened on my first playthrough, and it will make you feel so much better about any way you've ever played this game. So, because Casimir actually owes most of his success in the story to my first half, Gaheris, who messed up on every available point. So Gaheris is also based on a previous OC of mine from my comic, which I am totally intending to get back to writing at some point soon. And they were my first attempt at creating character in the game. They're non-binary, which I think is really cool. That's an option. I'm going to talk more about that later because I have some I'm excited about it. And they were a wood elf ranger. I'm inventive, I know. I really like wood elves. But I did actually recently remake them as a tiefling. And essentially, I made some very, very poor decisions in that specific game. Namely, I'd heard very little about Baldur's Gate, other than the fact that it was based on D&D and that I would really like it, before I started playing. And I was so focused on successfully completing, the main quests I was given, because I assumed, you did side quests for fun and the rest of it, you do the main quests, that I missed some very important things early on in my gameplay, namely nearly all of the companion characters. Well, not all, technically. I obviously met Shadowheart and Lae'zel on the Nautiloid, and found them again when I got down to the beach, and I also successfully found Gale, all on my own, which I am very proud of, and I immediately fell in love with him, because he's an autistic coded man who loves books. I mean, how could I not? He's basically me. However, I actually turned Lae'zel away when I did find her again, because I decided that she was too mean, and I also somehow got it into my head that if I agreed to her plan to go to the Githyanki Crash, it meant I wouldn't be doing the other plan of going to the Grove, not realising that the Githyanki Crash is so far along in the story that you naturally do all the Grove stuff before you even get close to it. So I turned her away, so I didn't have her. I just had Shadowheart and Gale. Because the real crimes I committed were against the other three companion characters. See, no one had told me that all of the origin characters basically show up in the first kind of half an hour of gameplay, except maybe Karlak, who it takes a little bit longer. You probably end up visiting the Grove before you get anywhere near her. And you can find them all in Act 1. I figured it would be impossible to miss them if they were that important, and so I wasn't worrying about it. I assumed they would just show up as part of the gameplay at some later date. And as a consequence of this, I missed all three of them, Will I obviously must have seen because he stood right by the entrance to the grove, but there were so many other characters in the grove that I got slightly overwhelmed. I'd already forgotten what the poor man looked like. I hadn't heard anybody talking about him just because I'd not had much exposure to the game, so I didn't know to be looking for him, and I ended up not speaking to him at all. Because I'd forgotten what Will looked like, of course, and I'd forgotten to talk to him, I also never met Karlach, because the easiest way to find Karlach is to find Will and then he leads you there, because otherwise you end up not going up the Risen Road section of the map, particularly if you don't have Lae'zel and you're not looking for the crash. You kind of never end up there. So I didn't meet Karlach either, and I wasn't exploring much off of what I thought was the main path, not realising that this is really the kind of game where you're just meant to explore everything. So I didn't find either of them. And then there's Astarion. I left that poor man standing on a hill for the entirety of Act 1 because I just never quite explored that corner of the map. I took a slightly different route through the North Lloyd when I was coming off the beach, which led me straight past Gale, completely missing Astarion, who I had technically heard of. I knew that there was a vampire character in this and that everyone was obsessed with him. I just kept assuming that he would show up later, maybe in Act 2. And honestly, looking back on it, I'm kind of impressed with myself for getting as far as I did on that particular playthrough, given that I only ever had 3 members of my party, because it was just Gaheris, Shadowheart, and Gale. I made it all the way to the Grimforge in the Underdark, despite there only being 3 of us, and the party was also constantly slightly under-leveled for where we were at. I was only level 4 by the time I reached the Grimforge, because I'd done so few side quests in Act 1. I never went anywhere near Anti-Ethel, never went anywhere near the Risen Road. I did find the Blighted Village, and admittedly I nearly got ambushed and I survived it, but I never went in the basement there either, because I'm an idiot. Or I think I made it into the smithy basement, but I never fought the spiders, but I never got anywhere near the Necromancy of Thay or anything. And it was only when I was in the Grimforge and the fight with Nir, I'd failed about 100 times. And so I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to do that thing that they tell you to never do on video games. I'm just going to Google how you win this fight, because there's got to be some technique, some strategy, because I keep dying over and over again because I was level 4 fighting a whole bunch of, are they level 4 or level 5 dwarves? Point is, there was 20 of them and 3 of me. We were dying a lot, so I was like, I'll Google it. And when I Googled it, I found somebody else who'd been having the same problem. But that person was explaining their party setup, and they were like, look, I'm playing, I can't remember what they still playing, but I'm running with Shadowheart, Karlach, and Astarion. And I read that and I was like, well, I didn't recognise Karlach's name, because I didn't know much about the game. But I recognised the name Astarion, because I knew everybody was obsessed with him. And I was like, that means I should have already run into this guy before I got here. And so I caved, and I googled, where do you find Astarion? Only to realise that I had left the poor little vampire man on the beach since the very, very beginning of the game. So I went back to get him, and I also figured that whilst I was at it, I would look and see if there was any way for me to re-recruit Lae'zel, because it was starting to occur to me that I might have made a mistake in turning her away, given I had so few companions. So I looked up and I discovered that if you go to where the Githyanki patrol is, if you can go pick up Lae'zel, even if you rejected her the first time, she'll still come with you. So I went and picked up Lae'zel, went back to the Grimforge, was winning my fight, everything went okay, and started progressing through the game. And obviously after I won that fight at the Grimforge, I pretty much immediately went up into the Shadowcurse lands, because that was the next thing to do. So I started Act 2, having only had Astarion in my party for about 5 minutes, missing the entire Githyanki crash, just for reference. And let me tell you, meeting Astarion 5 seconds before you go into Act 2 is a really interesting experience, because he's not been in your party for 1 day when he openly admits to being a vampire. I think because it's set to trigger to have him admit he's a vampire when you go into Act 2, regardless of if he's revealed himself or not, because you kind of need to know. He then tried to bite me, and then, only a couple of in-game days later, because once again, I was still not doing the side quests because I had not learnt my lesson, he was busy making a deal with the devil over scars that I didn't know he had. Also, he was just kind of a bit of an arrogant arse if you've kind of not had all of that time getting to know him and having him slowly open up and learning about the fact that this man is deeply traumatized. And so I was just kind of sitting here like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? He's insane. And my character was spending most of their time hiding and talking to Gale because he seemed like the most normal person in there, despite the fact that he tried to romance a goddess. And like I said, I didn't learn my lesson either, because as I was leaving Act 2, Halcyon got all sad with me because I'd never lifted the Shadow Curse, not realising that that was a thing I could even do. And so I had to Google how to do that again because once you defeated Keteric Thorn, trying to find the root of that quest is really difficult. Turns out you need to speak with the dead on Art Karlach, who has obviously died because you didn't do anything to help him. And then you can lift the Shadow Curse, so I got Halcyon back, so that was fine. And yeah, we earned Act 3, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take a pause on this playthrough, and I think I'm going to replay the first 2 acts of the game the way you're supposed to, with a new character, new setup, just so that I can see what I've missed before I go on and finish the game. And so I created Casimir, and I figured, you know what, I'll romance Astarion, because I think it will be funny, because this guy is so annoying. We'll see how that goes, only to immediately get slapped in the face with how much I loved him and his story, and how beautifully written his story is when you actually play everything in the right order. And in fact, I had the same deal with Halcyon, because I was like, I've heard that you could romance Halcyon at the same time, so I was like, I'll also romance the bear, because I can, and it would be funny. And then Halcyon's so sweet, and I love him, and I want to protect him always. And so I kept going with Casimir, and I made some mistakes on that run as well, namely because I've been travelling exclusively with Shadowheart and Gale in my first playthrough. I decided to not bother giving them much attention in the second one, because I was like, I already know them. I was mostly travelling with Will and Karlach, and then I replaced Will with Halcyon when I got a bit further. Which, side note, I think I'm in love with Karlach. Like, that woman has my whole heart. She's... We love Karlach. And this was fine for playing with Gale, because you could do almost all of his companion quests without ever actually having him go out with your party at all. It was not so good for Shadowheart, who got quite reasonably rather annoyed with me when I made the decision to free the Night Song without consulting her, and she promptly left my party. And I really didn't have the energy to go back and try and win her over again, because I figured I'd probably go back to the other playthrough, so I would find out what happened to her eventually, and I just kind of let her leave. Which does mean Shadowheart is the only companion whose quest I've not completed in some way. However, I also messed up Lae'zel's quest a little, because I got very jumpy about entering the Astral Prism. I decided to go the mountain route this time and actually go to the Githyanki Crash. And I got really jumpy about entering the Astral Prism because I was slightly scared that the Emperor would abandon me if I did that. And so I decided to circumvent the problem entirely by just not talking to the Inquisitor and taking her into Act 3, having not done that. And I'm fairly certain that as a result of that, because she never came to terms with the whole Orpheus thing, she got eaten by Blackith in the epilogue, which was not my plan, but, oops. But otherwise it all went well. However, what I did realise playing through Act 3 with Casimir, who had like an actual full cast of companions, the only ones I didn't end up having at the end of the game were Shadowheart, because she left, and Minthara, because at the time, I don't know if they'd patched it so that you could recruit Minthara and Halcyon at the time by just knocking Minthara out rather than killing her, but I didn't know that, so I didn't have her. But that was fine. But what I realised was that on my first playthrough, if I wanted to complete it, it was going to be really, really hard, because half of the setups of the quests for Act 3 I didn't have access to, because I had no Will, I had no Karlach. Lae'zel had also never made it to the Crash in that first run, so I was going to end up losing her again, because I'm fairly certain there's no way to complete her companion story if you don't enter the Astral Prism with her. And I'd let Jaheira die at Moonrise Towers and not resurrected her, so I didn't have Jaheira either, which meant all the stuff with the Harpers and Minsk and Nine Fingers, like, I could get into it, but I was going to have to go out of my way to find all of these things and get none of the benefit of the companion stories. And so I was going to have to bend over backwards to make Act 3 work for me. And let's face it, Act 3 with no Karlach would just be sad anyway. And I was also kind of scared that because my Tavkiris did not get on well with Astarion, because I found him real sus and he would seem very power hungry when I met him, and I didn't have the context of knowing how he got there. I was slightly afraid that if I played through that version, we wouldn't have a good enough relationship that I could convince him to not ascend, and I really didn't like the idea of Astarion ascending and, losing his soul and all that nonsense. So, essentially, I scrapped that campaign. I have remade Kiris as a blue tiefling this time. And in fact, a Dark Urge tiefling, because I thought it'd be fun to play the Dark Urge. And I do plan to 100% finish redo that playthrough and finish it and romance Gale properly because I want to find out what happens at the end of that because I do still love the man. But yeah, that was the interesting events of my first playthrough of this game and how atrociously badly it went. But I've been rambling for a while now, and it has just occurred to me that there are a few things in this game that I was really, really excited about that I haven't had a chance to mention properly. The first one being the gender thing. My character Gahiris was non-binary, both because the OC they're based on is non-binary, and just because I was really excited that that was an option that I could pick. However, what I didn't realise until I played Casimir was that the dialogue in game actually does change based on the gender you select. I had assumed that various characters were referring to Gahiris with they them pronouns because that was just what they did with all characters regardless of the gender you pick. Like, even if you're playing like a female or a male character, they just refer to all of them as they them because it means that they don't have to record different dialogue options. But when I played Casimir, they of course referred to him using he/him pronouns because that's what I'd selected, meaning that the they/them thing wasn't incidental, it was intentional, and they'd intentionally been using they/them pronouns for my character the entire time, and it made me so happy, and redoing this playthrough as Garrus still makes me so happy hearing all of the characters refer to them as non-binary, and it's just, oh, it's so cute, and I love it. And I also love the fact that you can romance any character regardless of your gender, which is very cool. And yeah, just the gender and sexuality stuff in this game is really, really, really fun to me. Don't even get me started on Dame Aylin and Isabel because they are adorable and so sweet and so cool. And Dame Aylin's got such a, like, she's got like a massive sword and wings and armor, and my little gay heart is very excited about it. And the other thing that I kind of felt I had to mention, because when it happened in game, I was just like, oh my god, this is incredible, is the music in the House of Hope. The music in general is kind of amazing, although I'll admit I didn't actually meet Alfira on my first playthrough either, because I didn't know where she was. But I remember playing the House of Hope, and I remember when I finally reached the final battle against Raphael, after much suffering and much accidental setting Astarion on fire. It was very stressful, and I knew that there was going to be a really big fight at the end of it, so I was trying my best to get to that final battle with as much health as possible. And I finally got there, and I was like, okay, I'm tired, I kind of need the loo, I'm going to wait for the battle to start. Well, like, when he's finished talking, the battle will start, and I'll use that as an excuse to just take a break and we'll stop there. And then the battle started, and the music started playing, and the singing, and I was like, I literally, I couldn't take my headphones off, I couldn't step away from the screen, I was just like, I've got to do this. Now I've got to do it properly. It's such a good song. And that moment was just like, I understand now why people get so excited about video games and video game music. It was just, ooh, it was so good. And then finally, there's just the writing and the characters. I love all of them so much. Like I said, I'm planning on finishing the Gale romance next, but honestly, I want to try all of them, especially Karlach, because I just adore her so much and I think she's amazing. But I do keep changing my mind on who I should do next, whether it should be Karlach, whether I should try Shadowheart, because I think that could be really, really fun, and she's just gorgeous. But also, like, Will needs a hug and many forehead kisses. I'm not massively interested in romancing Lae'zel. I don't know why, but I think it's just because she's very, very stabby, and I'm not sure how I feel. I mean, so is Astarion, to be fair, but Astarion is stabby in a charismatic way, whereas Lae'zel is just stabby in a very blunt way. But I'm also kind of tempted to try it, because I kind of want to see what happens if you get her to actually like you, because she's never really liked many of my tabs that much. So yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do next, or what character I'm going to play next. I kind of want to play lots of different types of characters, and not just keep playing Wood Elves, which is what I keep doing. But like I said, I've remade Gahiris as both a Dark Urge and a Tiefling, and that's been really fun so far. Like, the Dark Urge, there's some fun stuff in there, and like all the different narration, the different dialogue options you get is very fun. I definitely recommend giving it a try if you haven't. Although I don't think I'm ever going to do an evil playthrough. I was tempted. I was like, I'll do a playthrough where I make all good decisions. Then it might be fun to try an evil one. But like, I can't really, because if I do an evil playthrough, Karlach will leave me. And also, Halsin will be dead, most likely, and I can't do that to them because I love them both and I want to give them so many hugs, and I can't make them upset. Also, I don't really like choosing options. Like, I couldn't let, like, Arabella die. She's like a small child. I feel guilty for making the pixels in my screen sad. But yeah, I am sure that there is something I'm forgetting to say, but basically this game is incredible. I am obsessed. This video probably made no sense because it's a rambling mess, but I am definitely considering making another animatic based on this game, I'm going to be entirely honest. Although when I'll find the time to do that, who knows. And if you keep an eye on my Tumblr and possibly my Instagram, there will probably be a ton more fan art and sketches and doodles coming soon because, like I said, I'm really excited about it. I love this game. I think the characters are so cool and I'm having a lot of fun drawing them. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you all soon. Bye!